Prison food. The shocking truth of what inmates really eat. A metal tray slides across a scratched steel counter with a hollow clatter that echoes down the concrete corridor. The sound is sharp, mechanical, a sound repeated thousands of times a day inside prisons across the world. To most people, it's just a tray, but to an inmate, it represents survival. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner all arrive the same way, pushed forward by unseen hands, portioned by strict budgets, and consumed under watchful eyes. No menus, no choices, no second servings unless you know how to get them. For millions of incarcerated men and women, food isn't just about hunger. It's about power, control, punishment, and sometimes profit. Some trays arrive hot, others arrive cold. Sometimes the food is fresh, sometimes it isn't. And while prisons are required to feed inmates enough to survive, what actually ends up on those trays tells a story few people ever hear, a story hidden behind razor wire and locked doors. Because the truth is, prison food isn't just bad. In some places, it's dangerous. Former inmates have described meals crawling with insects, mold hidden beneath bread, meat so processed it barely resembles food, and portions so small that hunger becomes a constant companion, a slow, gnawing presence that never quite goes away. But those are just the stories that make it outside. The real story is far more complicated and far more disturbing, because behind every tray is a system built on budgets, a system built on contracts, a system built on cutting costs, sometimes at any cost. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Prison food isn't just a meal, it's a business. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Hunger inside a prison feels different than hunger on the outside. On the outside, hunger means you forgot to eat. Inside, hunger means you can't. Meals come at fixed times, whether you're ready or not. Miss chow time and you miss your chance to eat. There are no late-night snacks, no quick runs to the store, no opening the refrigerator just to see what's inside. For many inmates, the time between dinner and breakfast can stretch for more than 12 hours. 12 hours is a long time when your last meal barely filled the tray. And that hunger changes people. It sharpens tempers. It fuels fights. It turns ordinary objects into currency. A honey bun can become a bargaining chip. A ramen noodle pack can become payment. And a single piece of fruit can be worth more than cash. Because inside prison walls, food isn't just nutrition. It's survival. The first prison meal is something almost every former inmate remembers. It usually comes within hours of arrival, after the fingerprints, after the mugshot, after the long wait in a holding cell that smells like disinfectant and sweat. You're handed a tray without explanation. No one tells you what's on it. No one asks if you're hungry. No one cares if you eat. The tray might hold a scoop of beans, a slice of bread, and a small portion of something that looks like meat, though it's often hard to tell exactly what kind. The first bite is always the same. Hesitant, not because of the taste, but because of what it represents. That first meal is the moment it becomes real. You're not visiting. You're not leaving. You live here now, and this is what you eat. Some inmates force the food down, driven by nerves and exhaustion. Others can't eat at all, their stomachs tied in knots from fear. But sooner or later, everyone learns the same lesson. You eat what you're given, or you go hungry. Feeding a prison is a massive operation. Thousands of meals, every single day. No exceptions. Each tray must meet minimum calorie requirements set by regulations. On paper, those meals are supposed to provide enough nutrition to sustain a healthy adult. On paper, everything looks fine. But paper doesn't show portion sizes. Paper doesn't show quality. And paper doesn't show what happens when budgets get tight. Food service is one of the most expensive parts of running a prison. And when administrators need to cut costs, the kitchen is often the first place they look. Cheaper ingredients, smaller portions, more processed food. Every cent saved per tray adds up to thousands of dollars over time. And that creates pressure to serve meals that are as cheap as possible while still technically meeting the rules. which means prison food often becomes a careful balancing act between nutrition and cost. Most people imagine prison kitchens as sterile, organized places run by trained staff. The reality is often very different. In many prisons, the kitchen is run largely by inmates themselves, supervised by a handful of officers or civilian staff. Some of those inmate workers take pride in what they do. For them, the kitchen is a chance to escape the monotony of the cell block and learn a skill they might use someday on the outside. But others are there simply because they were assigned. And when you combine tight budgets, aging equipment, and overworked staff, problems start to appear. Broken refrigerators, leaking pipes, rusting shelves, inconsistent temperatures. Small problems in a normal kitchen can become serious risks in a prison kitchen, because when something goes wrong, there's no closing early. The meals still have to go out, no matter what. One of the most common complaints about prison food isn't the taste, it's the portions. Many inmates describe meals that look substantial at first glance until you start eating. A scoop of rice that's mostly air, a ladle of soup that's mostly water, a piece of meat that's thinner than it should be. Individually, the portions might meet minimum standards, but together, they often leave inmates feeling unsatisfied. And that's where the prison economy begins. Because when the tray is enough, inmates look for other ways to eat. Some trade, some gamble, some borrow, and some take risks that can land them in even deeper trouble. All for something as simple as food. For inmates who can afford it, commissary becomes a lifeline. Packets of ramen noodles, peanut butter, crackers, candy bars. Foods that might seem ordinary on the outside become incredibly valuable on the inside. But commissary isn't free, and not every inmate has someone on the outside sending money, which creates a divide between those who can afford extra food and those who can't. Hunger becomes more than a physical feeling. It becomes a social one, a daily reminder of who has resources and who doesn't. In prison, food quickly becomes a form of money. A single ramen pack might be traded for a favor. A bag of chips might settle a debt, and a full commissary order might make someone a target. Entire underground economies form around food systems of trade and barter that operate quietly but constantly. Because when official systems don't meet people's needs, unofficial ones take their place. And those systems come with their own rules. Rules that aren't written down. Rules that aren't enforced by guards. Rules that can have serious consequences if broken. Prison meals are supposed to provide enough calories and nutrients to maintain health. But meeting the minimum requirements isn't always the same as providing a balanced diet. Fresh fruits and vegetables can be expensive. High-quality protein costs more. And variety takes planning. So many prison meals rely heavily on starches and processed foods items that are cheap, filling, and easy to store. Over time, that kind of diet can take a toll. Weight gain, weight loss, fatigue, health problems. For inmates serving long sentences, prison food isn't just a temporary inconvenience. It's a long-term reality. Ask former inmates about prison food, and the stories come quickly. Stories about undercooked meals. Stories about spoiled ingredients. Stories about finding things in their food that shouldn't be there. Some stories are exaggerated, but others are documented back by inspections, lawsuits, and official reports. Because while many prisons operate safely and responsibly, others have struggled with serious food service problems. And when something goes wrong in a prison kitchen, the consequences can affect hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at once. Food affects more than hunger. It affects morale. It affects behavior. It affects safety. A bad meal can ruin a day. A pattern of bad meals can create tension. And enough tension can lead to conflict. Guards know it. Administrators know it. And inmates definitely know it. Food might seem like a small detail in the larger prison system. But inside those walls, it matters more than most people realize. Behind every prison meal is a number, a cost per tray, a daily allowance, a yearly budget. In some facilities, that number can be shockingly low, sometimes just a few dollars per inmate per day to cover breakfast, lunch, and dinner combined. Out of that small amount must come ingredients, transportation, storage, preparation, and labor. When budgets shrink, Something has to give. Sometimes it's variety. Sometimes it's freshness. And sometimes it's quality. Cheap cuts of meat get replaced with processed substitutes. Fresh vegetables get replaced with canned ones. Real eggs get replaced with powdered mix. Milk gets replaced with watered-down alternatives. Everything becomes about stretching resources just a little further. Because saving just 50 cents per inmate per day might not sound like much, but in a prison with 1,000 inmates, that's $500 a day, more than $15,000 a month, nearly $200,000 a year. And suddenly, smaller portions and cheaper ingredients start to make financial sense, even if they don't make human sense. Many prisons don't even cook their own food anymore. Instead, they outsource meals to private food service companies, corporations that promise to feed inmates efficiently and cheaply under strict contracts. On paper, it sounds like a perfect solution. Professional management, standardized meals, lower costs. But critics say the system creates a dangerous incentive because the less a company spends on food, the more profit it makes. And that pressure can lead to decisions that affect the quality of every single meal served. Cheaper ingredients, bulk substitutions, reduced portions. Sometimes the changes are subtle. Other times, they're impossible to ignore. Because when corners get cut in food service, inmates are often the first to notice and the last to be heard. Complaints about prison food are constant. Too cold, too small, too bland, too strange. But in prison, complaining doesn't always change anything. Formal grievance systems exist, but they can take weeks or months to process. And by the time a complaint is reviewed, the meal in question is long gone. Most complaints never make it outside prison walls. They stay inside, pass from inmate to inmate as stories, warnings, and shared experiences. And over time, those stories build a picture of what daily life is really like. A picture painted in lukewarm soup and dry bread. Sometimes, though, the problems become too big to ignore. Food poisoning outbreaks, contaminated ingredients, unsanitary kitchens. When something goes wrong in a prison kitchen, it doesn't affect just one person, it can affect hundreds. Entire housing units can get sick at once. Medical staff get overwhelmed. Guards scramble to maintain order. And administrators scramble to figure out what happened. Because in prison, even something as simple as a bad meal can turn into a crisis. Inmates learn quickly how to spot food that's gone bad. A strange smell, a slimy texture, a sour taste. Sometimes they eat it anyway. Because hunger can override caution. And refusing a tray means risking hours, sometimes an entire day without food. It becomes a gamble. Eat and hope it's safe. Or don't eat and know you'll be hungry. It's a choice most people on the outside never have to make. Food requires trust. Trust that it's safe. Trust that it's clean. Trust that it won't make you sick. But in prison, trust is often in short supply. Meals are prepared out of sight, behind swinging kitchen doors most inmates never see behind. You don't know who cooked it. You don't know how long it sat. You don't know where it came from. All you know is that it's what you've been given, and that uncertainty becomes part of every meal. Some inmates require special diets, medical conditions, religious beliefs, allergies. On paper, accommodations exist, special trays, alternative ingredients, modified meals. But in practice, providing those meals consistently can be difficult, especially in overcrowded facilities where kitchens are already stretched thin. Mistakes happen. Trays get mixed up. Ingredients get substituted. Requests get delayed. And for inmates who depend on those meals, a simple mistake can have serious consequences. Mealtime in prison often involves waiting, long lines, slow movement, constant counting. Inmates shuffle forward tray by tray, sometimes standing for long periods before reaching the serving line. By the time they sit down to eat, the food might already be cooling, and meals aren't leisurely. There's often a limited time to eat before trays must be returned and the next group brought in. So meals become rushed. Quick bites, minimal conversation, eyes always watching clock. Because when time is up, the trays go back whether you're finished or not. Prison food has a reputation for being bland. Low salt, low seasoning, minimal variety. Part of that is intentional strong flavors can be expensive, and simple recipes are easier to produce in large quantities. But over time, the sameness becomes noticeable. The same textures, the same colors, the same tastes, day after day, week after week, year after year, until meals blur together into a routine that rarely changes. Inmates get creative with food. Ramen mixed with chips, peanut butter spread on crackers, candy melted into improvised desserts. Simple ingredients get transformed into something different, something that breaks the monotony. These improvised meals become small moments of normalcy in an otherwise controlled environment, a reminder of life outside, a reminder of choice, even if the choices are limited. Meals are one of the few times inmates gather together regularly. Tables fill, voices rise, conversations flow. For a brief moment, the rigid structure of prison life softens just a little, but meals can also be tense. Seating arrangements matter. Alliances matter. Reputations matter. Where you sit and who you sit with can say a lot about your place in the prison social structure. And sometimes, something as simple as a seat can become a source of conflict. Extra food is powerful. An extra tray, an extra piece of bread, an extra scoop of rice. Small things that can mean a lot. Sometimes extras come from kitchen workers who save portions for friends. Sometimes they come from trades. And sometimes they come with strings attached. Because in prison, nothing valuable is ever truly free. Kitchen jobs are some of the most sought-after positions in prison. Not because they're easy, they're often hot, exhausting, and repetitive, but because they come with advantages. Extra food, better schedules, time out of the cell. For some inmates, working in the kitchen is a way to survive a little more comfortably. For others, it's a way to help others survive too. Because a little extra food can make a big difference. Nighttime is when hunger hits hardest. Dinner might be served in the late afternoon, leaving a long stretch before breakfast the next morning. Stomachs growl in dark cells. Sleep comes slowly, and thoughts drift back to food, what you had, what you didn't have, and what you wish you had. For inmates without commissary or connections, the nights can feel especially long, because hunger is hardest to ignore when there's nothing else to distract you. For inmates serving long sentences, prison food becomes part of life's rhythm. Birthdays pass with the same meals. Holidays pass with slightly altered versions of the same meals. Years pass measured partly in trays. Over time, expectations change. The food might not improve, but the reaction to it does. What once seemed shocking becomes normal. What once seemed unbearable becomes routine. And that might be the most surprising part of all. Most days in prison follow a predictable rhythm. Count time, work time, yard time, meal time. The routine rarely changes, and that predictability becomes a strange kind of comfort. In a place where almost everything is controlled, knowing when you'll eat is one of the few certainties inmates have. But when the food system breaks down, the entire prison feels it. Maybe a delivery truck didn't arrive. Maybe the kitchen equipment failed. Maybe staffing was short. Maybe something went wrong behind the scenes that inmates never even hear about. Suddenly trays are late. Lines grow longer. Tempers grow shorter. And the tension spreads faster than any announcement ever could. Because inside prison walls, food delays aren't just inconvenient. They're dangerous. Hungry inmates are unpredictable inmates. And officers know that when meals are delayed, the risk of confrontation rises with every passing minute. When kitchens can't serve regular meals, they often turn to substitutes. Prepackaged trays, cold sandwiches, simple emergency meals designed to be handed out quickly. Sometimes inmates call them lockdown meals. 2 slices of bread, a thin layer of filling, maybe a piece of fruit if supplies allow. They're designed to be cheap. They're designed to be fast. And they're designed to meet minimum requirements, nothing more. But after a few days of substitute meals, morale drops fast. Because while one cold sandwich might be tolerable, 3 days of them feels like punishment, even when it isn't meant to be. Prison kitchens are supposed to be inspected regularly. Health officials check temperatures. They check cleanliness. They check storage areas and preparation surfaces. On inspection days, kitchens often run differently. Extra cleaning, extra caution, extra attention to detail. Everything looks the way it's supposed to look. But inspections only capture a moment in time, a snapshot of a single day in a system that runs every day. And what happens between inspections can tell a very different story, because maintaining standards every single day is much harder than meeting them once in a while. Over the years, reports have surfaced from various prisons describing food-related problems: undercooked meals, improper storage, unsanitary conditions. Sometimes these reports come from official inspections. Sometimes they come from lawsuits. And sometimes they come from staff members who decide to speak up. Each report tells a piece of the story, a glimpse into a system that most people never see. And while not every prison has serious problems, enough reports exist to raise difficult questions. Questions about oversight, questions about accountability, and questions about what inmates are really being served. Food poisoning is a risk anywhere large numbers of meals are prepared. Schools, hospitals, restaurants, and prisons are no exception. But in prison, outbreaks can spread quickly, especially when hundreds of people eat the same meal at the same time. Symptoms appear within hours: nausea, stomach pain, fever. Medical units fill up. Officers scramble to maintain order, while inmates grow increasingly uncomfortable and increasingly frustrated. Because when dozens of people get sick at once, it's impossible to ignore and impossible to hide. After a food incident, investigations usually follow. Inspectors arrive. Records get reviewed. Staff get questioned. Administrators look for answers. Was the food stored correctly? Was it cooked properly? Was it served at the right temperature? Sometimes the cause is obvious. Sometimes it isn't. But regardless of the outcome, the memory of the incident lingers, especially among inmates who experienced it firsthand. Because once food has made you sick, every future meal comes with a little extra doubt. For some inmates, prison food becomes something they tolerate. For others, it becomes something they avoid whenever possible. Appetites shrink. Meals get skipped. Commissary becomes more important. And for those without access to extra food, skipping meals can come with real consequences: fatigue, weight loss, difficulty concentrating. Hunger becomes part of daily life, a quiet but constant presence that follows inmates from meal to meal. One of the hardest parts of prison food isn't the taste, it's the repetition. The same meal cycle again and again, often on rotating schedules that repeat every few weeks. Beans and rice, pasta, processed meat, bread, again and again. The predictability might make planning easier for kitchens, but for inmates, it creates a sense of endless sameness. Days blur together, weeks blur together, and meals become markers of time passing, small reminders of just how long someone's been inside. Holiday meals are supposed to be different, slightly better, slightly larger, slightly more special. Sometimes they include foods inmates don't see the rest of the year, small touches meant to acknowledge the occasion. But even holiday meals are shaped by budgets and logistics. And while some inmates look forward to them, others see them as reminders of what they're missing on the outside. Family gatherings, home cooking, familiar traditions, all replaced by a tray in a crowded room under fluorescent lights. Food has a way of connecting people to memories, a certain smell, a certain taste, a certain texture. In prison, those memories can feel especially vivid. A bite of something familiar can bring back moments from the outside kitchens, families, celebrations. And when those moments fade, the contrast between past and present becomes even sharper. Because prison food isn't just about what you're eating now. It's about everything you used to eat before. New inmates often struggle the most with prison food. The portions seem small. The flavors seem strange. The schedule feels rigid. It takes time to adjust. Time to learn when meals are served. Time to learn what's worth eating. Time to learn how to make the most of what's available. Older inmates sometimes watch new arrivals with quiet understanding, because they remember what it felt like. The confusion, the uncertainty, the first tray. Everyone remembers their first tray. Eventually, most inmates adapt. They learn which meals are filling, which ones to avoid, which ones are worth trading for. They develop routines. Save part of lunch for later. Mix commissary with chow hall food. Trade for what they need. Adaptation becomes survival, and survival becomes routine. From the outside, prison food might seem like a minor detail, just another part of prison life. But inside, it's constant. 3 times a day, every day, year after year. It's one of the few shared experiences nearly every inmate has in common. And that shared experience creates a quiet understanding and unspoken knowledge of what it means to live that way. Because no matter who you are or where you came from, everyone stands in the same line. Everyone takes a tray. Everyone eats the same food. Over time, prison food becomes more than just food. It becomes routine. It becomes structure. It becomes part of daily existence. Meals mark the passage of time in a place where time often feels frozen. Breakfast means morning. Dinner means night. And somewhere between those meals, another day passes. Another day closer to release. Or another day deeper into a sentence. Most people on the outside rarely think about prison food. It's out of sight, out of mind. When it does come up, it's often the subject of jokes or quick comments, assumptions about bland meals and small portions. But the reality is more complex. Because prison food sits at the intersection of cost, policy, logistics, and human need. It's shaped by decisions made far from the dining hall, decisions about budgets and priorities. And those decisions affect every tray that gets served. For some inmates, prison food becomes a turning point, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. Loss of choice, loss of control, loss of independence. 3 meals a day chosen by someone else, served at someone else's time, eaten under someone else's rules. It's a small thing on the surface, but over time, those small things add up, until something as simple as a meal becomes a reminder of everything that's changed. After enough time inside, eating stops being simple. It becomes strategic. Experienced inmates don't just eat, they plan. They learn how to stretch a meal beyond the few minutes allowed in the chow hall. A piece of bread saved in a pocket can mean the difference between sleeping and lying awake with a growling stomach. A piece of fruit saved from breakfast might become dessert hours later. A small reward at the end of a long day. Some inmates eat slowly, trying to trick their bodies into feeling full. Others eat fast, afraid that someone might try to take what little they have. Because hunger in prison doesn't just belong to you. It's everywhere. You can see in the way trays are scraped clean, in the way eyes follow untouched food, and in the way even the smallest leftovers never go to waste. Nothing edible is ignored for long. Prison dining halls have rules that aren't posted on any wall. Rules inmates learn through observation, mistakes, and sometimes consequences. Don't take food from another tray. Don't reach across tables. Don't sit in the wrong seat. Don't stare too long at someone else's meal. These rules might sound small, but inside prison, small mistakes can escalate quickly because food is personal. Food is survival. And anything connected to survival carries weight. Even something as simple as an extra piece of bread can become a source of tension if the wrong person takes notice. Veteran inmates often watch the serving line carefully. They notice which workers give larger portions, which guards pay attention, which trays look fuller than others. Timing matters. Standing in the right place at the right time might mean a slightly bigger scoop or a slightly thicker slice. It's never guaranteed, but when portions are small, even a little difference matters. Sometimes inmates slow their pace on purpose, trying to reach the server known for heavier portions. Other times they hurry, afraid the food might run low before their turn comes. Because once the trays are gone, they're gone, and there's rarely a backup plan. It doesn't happen every day, but sometimes food runs short. Maybe the count was off. Maybe the portions were too generous. Maybe more people showed up than expected. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. The last people in line get less. Or sometimes nothing at all. Those moments stick with people. Because it's one thing to receive a small portion. It's another thing entirely to reach the end of the line and realize there's nothing waiting for you. And in a place where meals are scheduled and controlled, missing one can feel like falling through the cracks of a system that was never designed with flexibility in mind. Every prison dining hall has its own sound: the clatter of trays, the scrape of chairs, the hum of conversation, the occasional shout from across the room. It's loud, but it's a familiar kind of loud, the kind that becomes background noise after a while. But certain sounds always stand out: a tray hitting the floor, a raised voice, a chair pushed back too quickly. Those sounds cut through everything because they signal that something might be about to happen. And when something happens in a chow hall, everyone notices. Meals move fast, sometimes faster than people expect. In many facilities, inmates have only a short window to eat before the next group needs to come in. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if things are running smoothly. It's not much time, especially when you've been waiting in line. So inmates learn to eat quickly, bite after bite, barely tasting the food, focus more on finishing than enjoying. Because once time is called, the trays have to go back, even if you're still hungry. Food affects mood everywhere, but in prison, the effects are magnified. A filling meal can calm tensions. A disappointing meal can do the opposite. Guards often notice the difference. After a decent meal, the atmosphere might feel a little lighter. After a bad one, frustration lingers in the air. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a subtle shift: shorter tempers, sharper words, longer silences. But those small changes add up, because in a controlled environment, even small emotional shifts can ripple outward in unexpected ways. Kitchen workers see prison food differently than everyone else. They see the ingredients before they're cooked. They see the preparation. They see what goes into each meal. They know which shipments arrived fresh and which didn't. They know which days the kitchen runs smoothly and which days it struggles. And sometimes they see things that make them think twice about eating the same meals they help prepare. But kitchen work also comes with responsibility. Meals have to go out on time. No matter what, hundreds or thousands of people are counting on those trays, whether they realize it or not. In a place defined by rules and restrictions, small acts can stand out: a slightly larger portion, an extra slice of bread, a saved piece of fruit. These gestures might seem minor on the outside, but inside they can mean a lot, not just because of the food itself, but because of what it represents. A moment of kindness, a moment of understanding, a reminder that even in a structured system, individual choices still matter. Those moments don't change the system, but they change the day, and sometimes changing the day is enough. Over weeks and months, prison food becomes routine. Over years, it becomes something else entirely. Bodies adjust. Metabolisms change. Habits form. Some inmates gain weight. Others lose it. Some grow used to the meals. Others never do. But everyone is affected in some way, because food isn't just fuel. It's part of daily life. And when daily life changes, so does everything connected to it. Outside prison, food is often an afterthought. Inside prison, it's often a focus. Inmates think about upcoming meals. They remember past meals. They plan around future meals. Food becomes part of conversation. What's for dinner? Was lunch any good? Is breakfast worth waking up for? These conversations fill time. They create connection. They create routine. Because in a place where choices are limited, even small shared experiences matter. Variety is something many people take for granted. Different flavors, different textures, different meals. In prison, variety can be rare. And when something different appears on the tray, people notice. Even a small change can stand out. A different seasoning, a different side dish, a different dessert. Moments like that break the routine, even if only briefly. And sometimes that brief change is enough to lift spirits in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. For inmates serving long sentences, time moves in strange ways. Days feel long, years pass slowly, and meals become markers along the way. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, 3 points in every day. 3 reminders that time is still moving forward. even when it feels like everything else has stopped. Hunger isn't just physical, it's emotional too. It affects patience. It affects focus. It affects sleep. And over time, it can wear people down. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. A little discomfort each day adds up until hunger becomes part of the background, a constant presence that never fully disappears. In prison, food represents more than nutrition. It represents structure. It represents authority. It represents routine. Every tray is a reminder that someone else is in control of the schedule, the portions, and the choices. That reminder might be subtle, but it's always there. 3 times a day, every day. For many inmates, prison food marks both the beginning and the end of their sentences. The first tray is part of the intake process, one of the first signs that life has changed. And the last tray often comes shortly before release, one of the last reminders of what life has been. Between those trays lies everything else. Days, months, years, measured in meals. So what do inmates really eat? The answer isn't simple. It depends on the facility, the budget, the staff, the policies. Some meals are decent, some are forgettable, and some leave lasting impressions for all the wrong reasons. But every tray tells a story about the system that produced it and the people who depend on it. And those stories rarely make it outside prison walls. The reality of prison food sits somewhere between expectation and assumption. It's not always as bad as people imagine, but it's rarely as good as people hope. It exists in that middle space shaped by necessity, constrained by budgets, and experienced by millions of people every year. And while most people will never see it firsthand, it remains a daily reality for those who live behind locked doors. Most people think prison punishment is about confinement, locked doors, high walls, barbed wire. But punishment can also be quieter than that. It can live in routines, in restrictions, in small daily realities, like standing in line for a tray, like eating what you're given, like never choosing your own meal. Small things. But small things repeated every day become big things over time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from behind bars.